Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Handmade Chelsea Online. My name is Lucky, and I'm hosting this session with Dani Crompton, who is a jewellery designer. So she's going to be answering some questions and talking about her experiences and inspirations behind her jewellery. So, Dani, just to start us off, could you just briefly explain a little bit of a background about yourself?
Hiya, I'm Dani. Essentially, I've always been a jeweler. I've always loved art, and I come from a family of very arty people. So straight from university, I went through and did a course at Chelsea in art, foundation course, and then went straight on and did a 3-year degree in jewellery design and silversmithing, which was at, where was it? Sir John Cass, so in one of the best jewellery schools in London, apparently. And I've been working my own jewellery and running my own business ever since, just kind of developing my skills, learning how to use new techniques, and keeping going with the momentum of design and art and all the things that I love.
Brilliant. So how have you always wanted to be a jeweler?
Essentially, not that I knew of. I knew I was going to be artistic. I wanted to be artistic. I was artistic. But it wasn't until I was on my foundation course and somebody said, oh, well, you've got to sign up for a degree now. And I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I knew it was 3 dimensions that I liked, so not painting or drawing. And it was actually a random comment from a friend who said, well, why don't you become a jewellery designer? And I was like, what? You can do that? I said, yeah, you can do jewellery design courses, because I used to have rings all over my hands, every finger covered in a silver ring, covered in jewellery. They were like, yeah, it's natural. So I went and applied, I got my place, and was hooked ever since.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you have any pieces nearby that you can show so we can get an idea of what kind of jewellery you create?
What I've got on is my seaweed ribbon necklace. But to come closer into camera, I have got, you can see it. So I work predominantly in silver and beadworks, but the beading is tiny, tiny little beads. So they're like 1 millimeter, some of them. So rather than seeing them as beads, you essentially see them as a texture, and they're just a good way of getting colour into my work. Not sure if you can.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So what was the inspiration behind that design particularly?
Well, this whole collection I do at the moment is called Nature's Way. I've been doing it for about 2.5 years. Before that, my work was actually very geometric. It was all about tessellation, geometric shapes, building forms. But I always wanted to have a more organic look to my work, but I didn't know how to do it, essentially. How to combine and use the beads and the materials that I love to make it. So now I've worked out a system, which I will reveal to you soon. I spend a lot of my time outdoors. I have dogs, I have a horse, I'm always in the woods, I'm always collecting things. So, for example, I have a slight obsession with lichen. So this gorgeous blue lichen that we walk past on trees every day, little things like that, which most people don't see, they fascinate me. And little pieces of root that's come off from a plant that was in a pond, so the way it's all fanned out like that. So I'm always looking for the small details in nature. So not at the large woodland, I'm always looking at the fungi, at the mosses, at the lichen, at the colours. And then I take photos everywhere I go. I have a massive stock of photos, but generally once the photo's taken, it's all in my mind, and I just let it kind of stew until something pops up and goes, right, let's give that a go. And then I go for it.
Wonderful. And so would you say you're largely inspired by nature then? Is your surroundings and
Yeah, definitely. I also love the way that nature kind of fights back against us. So, if a house is left derelict for a number of years, the plants will all move back in. The brickwork will start to split. The concrete will start to crack. And it's all nature just getting back in there and kind of retrieving what we've taken away. So I love that side of it, which was actually the inspiration behind this bracelet, which is quite a chunky beast. So this is made out of copper, the main elements here, which I patinated and really textured. So it's quite gnarly, a bit like the broken bricks, the broken foundations. But peeking through is this beautiful glimmer of sparkles and colour, which is the nature fighting back against us and just taking control again. So
That's really wonderful. And what do you think makes your work unique to you?
Essentially, it's my method. Like I say, I studied jewellery, and there I was taught my silversmithing techniques. So I love the use of silver and metals like the copper. I also took up beading because for some of my life, due to becoming a mother and so on, I wasn't able to get to my silversmithing materials and still wanted to create. So I learned a lot about beading. But my problem was how to connect my beading to my silver work. And this was my answer. This is called roving, and essentially it's sheep's wool. And it's what they use to do felting. You know, when people make felt toys and felt hats. So as you can see in this piece that's partially done, I use the felt inside the crevices of the silver that I've forged to sew the beads through. So it's a technique that I've kind of developed myself, and it means that I can have the beads up close to the metal. And once I've finished beading, you won't see the felt at all, the wool, it's gone. So I completely cover it in a crust of beads and anchor it into the silver, which gives the jewellery essentially a look that is unique to me.
That's wonderful. And could you just show us a little bit around your workshop, your workspace? It looks very interesting.
All right, so to my side here in the window, I've got my polishing wheel here, my drill. I've also got an ultrasonic cleaner, and where's that? There we go, rolling machine. They're all a little cramped together, but I tend to pull out the one that I need at the time and then put it back together. Unfortunately, it's a small room, but you make do. And then directly behind me, that's my workbench. So up here is where all my tools are, my work peg, my polishing, essentially the hub of it all.
I see.
Turn around to this side, which is where my computer lives, and where I do all my photography and online and everything like that.
Brilliant. I mean, so could you talk us through the process, you know, it's hard to say from start to finish, but how would you create a piece?
Right, well, essentially I start with the metalwork. So usually I try to recycle silver. So I take it from picture frames, old pieces of jewellery where I can, not always, but if I can, I will. So then I'll use my hammers and texturers to forge a form that I like. In my mind, I have a very basic outline of what I want to do and where I want to go. I like to just let the materials talk to me and see where I go. So sometimes I start out saying, today I need to make a necklace. By the end of the project, it will have turned into a pair of earrings. But I never stop it. I always let it go where it needs to be and where it wants to be. So yeah, using hammers, I can don't know if you see on there, I can texturize the silver with different hammer heads, curve it, make these shapes and forms. But all the time I'm having to think in my head, how can I get the wool in there? How can I get the beads in there? How can I hold it all together? So that's the one consideration I've got to keep going. So once the metalwork's done, it's all polished up, shiny if I want shiny, or matte. So a lot of my work is matte. I then go to adding the wool, which disappeared, as I said before, is this stuff. So I usually use a felting needle. Yeah. So you're getting the wool, you're putting it into the silver and you stab it. And this has got little burrs on it, which mat the wool together. So it goes from a very soft, fluffy, into a very solid, firm material. So when that's wedged in and solid and I can't get my needle in anymore, I then start sewing, which essentially is like sewing, needle and thread. But this is a very strong beading thread and the needles are very fine. So half of the fun at this point is being able to thread your needle. Once you got that down pat, you're fine. So yeah, then I use some very tiny, tiny beads. So there's a tube of them, there are hundreds in there. And they're literally, oop, you can't even see it. They're literally just between my fingers there, 1 millimetre in dimension. So it's all very small work. And then I go up to slightly larger ones that are probably about 3 mil, maybe. Some pieces I add in stone chips, pearls, slightly larger beads. Depends what really comes to me and what my colour palette is, and if it's something to do with the sea, then the pearls are more relevant, that sort of thing. And then I literally just sew. So I'm sewing through the wool, backwards and forwards, putting each bead on individually, one at a time, until it builds up, and then at one point I can't get the needle in anymore. There's no room for any more beads, and at that point I know I'm done. And then voila.
Wonderful. So how comes beads? Why did you choose beads as your main kind of element in your design?
It was a bit of a random choice, really, but I've always loved colour. But I've never been into gemstones, kind of diamonds, emeralds and pearls, that sort of thing, in stone setting. So I tried with acrylics. I used to make acrylic jewellery to add colour to my work that way. And then it was actually a little shop, a sewing shop, where I had my wedding dress made, and they did sewing classes. And my mother said to me, oh look, they do a beading class, why don't you give it a go? So I did a couple of evenings, did finish the course, bought myself some books and went from there. And essentially, once you start, you can't stop. I have boxes and boxes and trays of tiny little beads of every shape, colour and size you could possibly have. It's like a candy store. And I just love the way that you can introduce so much colour. You can blend the colours together like paint by just adding them in, but they've got to be tiny, small beads. I'm not a fan of big beads. They've got to be, or if big beads, they have to be made out of little beads. So yeah, I fell into it really, and now I've worked out how to attach them to my silver. I'm very happy.
Wonderful. So could you just show us some of the items that you have available in your shop so that we can see, and maybe if you can model any of them, if you can.
So this one isn't in my shop, but it's just shows my attraction to nature. This is actually a piece of wood that I found on my walks. So it's a proper real piece of wood on the ground, but it has to have a hole in it. So in there is felted and beaded. So I've beaded the moss into it and silver leafed it over the top. So, you know, it's kind of finding the right piece of material at the right time and knowing that I can embellish it in my mind and how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's very
but
nice.
this is actually going to be a wall piece. So it's going to go in a frame and hang. But right, so in my shop at the moment, I have my favourite ring, which is the sea foam ring. So this is based on the waves crashing in the sea and the foaming water fluffing in between it. So that was one of the first rings in the collection.
Beautiful. How much does that retail for?
That one is 210. So all of my jewellery is completely one-off. I can't and I don't want to ever make anything twice. Because of the way that I work, you could try and make the same thing twice, but it will never turn out exactly the same. So I love the fact that everything is a complete and utter one-off. Here we have the purple trumpet necklace, which hangs at a slight angle like that. And it's like a foam of beads, again, protruding out of the end of an opening cone of silver. That reminds me, it's quite of a springtime colours with that one, and things emerging out of the ground in spring after a cold winter. This is quite a new ring for me. Again, I've used copper and mixed it with silver. My rings are quite large statement rings. I have smaller earrings and day necklaces, but when it comes to rings, I really do like to push the boat out. But this one, it's called Hidden Depths. And if I can stop the light shining on it, oh, there we go. In there is full of resin, but there's beads and there's pearls and there's even a diamond. It's glinting away at the bottom, as if you're looking into a pond, into a little magical pond, and seeing what's hidden beneath in the depths. But even when it's not worn, I love my rings to be really sculptural little pieces of art. So you can see the texture on the copper in contrast to the very smooth and shiny silver.
Yeah, I can see definitely it's very nature inspired.
Yeah,
very much. It's beautiful.
Another material I use actually, which is quite unusual, is I use newspaper. So this ring here is called Cliff Face, and essentially because it's carved in such a way it reminds me of things like kind of the cliffs of Dover, so I just, you know, rock faces. But this whole grey element here is made out of newspaper. So I don't mash it up like papier-mâché. I actually individually glue layers and layers and layers of sheets of newspaper back together. And that forms like a block. A bit like making your own MDF, really. Block and block and block. And once I've got that solid block and it's completely dry, I then carve it and sand it and shape it. And all the colours from the articles and the ink and the print come through on the surface. So that's a really nice way of making a kind of rock-like texture, really. But no one ever knows that it's newspaper. They always think that it's stone or ceramic.
Yeah, I can see that.
Some of my earrings here. So these are my long studs. So from the front, a cluster of beads, but they're just held in an open-backed oval of silver. And they hang down quite smartly. So I quite like the idea that as you move around with earrings, they shouldn't just look beautiful from the front, because you're going to be seen from all angles. You're going to be seen everywhere. So to me, it's just as important that the back of your earrings is as pretty as the front.
Very true. I like that idea. Yeah, definitely.
So these, I mean, I say I can't do anything twice. I do the same design. I do different colors, but every one, even in the pair, my earrings are always slightly mismatched. They'll never be quite the same shape or quite the same length, but they'll match perfectly as a pair. Because in nature, you just don't get that kind of, well, that precision. I want it to just look like more organic. And then we've got some medium-sized studs. So these, again, I've got the silver back and the beads are coming out. And this always just reminds me of, you know, how plants are always growing out of other plants. So you might got like a rotting log and the plants are coming through, the mosses, the lichens. So it's just the kind of the symbiosis between the two materials in the same way that plants work together. And size-wise, they're kind of medium-sized ones, those. And then I go slightly smaller. And these are just tiny little studs where you just got the beads poking from the ends. And these are like great for every day, you know, add a little splash of colour, not too much, but, you know, it's something different, but you can wear it to the office and get away with it. So, and then one of my other larger rings, this one I call reflective pond ring. Again, this ring I've incorporated resin, which is slightly new to me, and how I did the Hidden Depths ring. But to look at it, you wouldn't really know it was a ring. Again, it's quite a little sculpture in itself. But to wear it, it just sits, worn like a normal ring. It just sits across the other two fingers. I mean, if you're sitting at a dinner party doing that, everyone's going to notice you. That one again, that one comes in at 200 no, that's 270, that one.
Oh wow, they're all so beautiful. As we're coming towards the end of the session, I just wanted to quickly summarize. So your rings, they range from which price?
Okay, so I think the most expensive thing I've got in the store is 335, which is a very large, intricately beaded bangle. Most of the rings come in around the 210 mark, and then the necklaces are around 160. The earrings come anything from 75 down to 38 for the smaller studs. And I also have some necklaces like this one, which are just the beading. So I haven't incorporated the beading into silver, just the beading on its own.
Okay, beautiful.
And that one's 48.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this live session. Dani's work is available on our shop. If you click the link in the Zoom text bar, you'll be able to have a look. And I believe Dani might be free for her a live one-to-one chat in her room. So feel free to ask any questions there.